Welcome and thank you for joining today's MLC Masterclass series, Unlock Productivity and Sustainability with Plant Floor Data. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. We have muted all participant lines to maintain sound quality throughout the session. However, we do encourage asking questions at any point by placing them in the questions box, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. We will do our best to address all of your questions either during the session or during the Q&A portion of the event. Lastly, this session is being recorded and will be sent via email within 24 hours of the session concluding, as well as available on the Manufacturing Leadership Council website within 5 to 7 business days. And now to today's moderator, MLC's co-founder, Vice President and Executive Director, Mr. David Brosell. David, I turn it to you.
Thank you, Lauren. And how's the audio? Is it working okay?
You sound great. It's perfect.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone to our webinar today. I'm very excited to talk about how we can better use plant floor data to unlock productivity and improve your sustainability efforts. A few background points I'd like to make before we get started, most of which are based around a lot of the research we do here at MLC. So our research clearly shows that manufacturers are looking at data generated from increasingly connected plants and factories as a major tool to improve production operations and to make them more efficient, more productive, and more sustainable. In fact, 73% of respondents to a survey we did last year say they consider manufacturing data to be essential to their future competitiveness. It is all part of what MLC calls becoming a data-driven enterprise, one that relies upon real-time and near real-time data to improve and speed decision-making, including identifying and resolving problems with equipment and processes. The benefits to becoming a data-driven business are compelling, but the path to actually becoming so is often strewn with challenges. That's because of a set of issues around data management that encompasses such things as data collection, normalization, standardization, analysis, and proper governance, including how best to improve decision-making processes using data. MLC research further indicates that the most significant barriers to a manufacturer becoming data-driven are a lack of common data formats, a lack of easy access to data, and a shortage of analytical skills in the workforce. Most companies are still on the early part of the learning curve of effectively analyzing data. This issue is kind of a moving target as data volumes in manufacturing organizations are growing exponentially. For example, only about half of the respondents to our survey research say they have a process to verify data accuracy and quality. And over 1/3 report they're struggling with capturing the right data that can in fact be useful to improving their operations. The good news is, though, that more and more companies see that better technology tools can help. Already 1/3 report they are using artificial intelligence tools to analyze their data. Data mastery, as we call it at MLC, will become more of an opportunity as well as a challenge in the years ahead as data volumes continue to grow, as we get better at applying analytics, as we get more adept at adjusting our decision-making processes to take advantage of derived insights from data, and as M4.0 projects become larger and more significant. Some like to think of data as the new oil. Others see it as more like sunlight. Whatever your analogy, data is a key asset for your company and must be managed strategically. With that, let's get into our discussion. It's my privilege to introduce John Petrusek, who is the head of data analytics and managing director at NTT Data. a MLC member company. We're very happy to have you, John, to talk about this important subject today. So please take it away and give us your thoughts about data architecture in particular.
Yeah, David, thank you for that open. I think you've hit on a number of topics that we hear from our clients on an ongoing basis. And I think when we think about improving productivity, improving or achieving sustainability goals, we really, a lot of the questions we get stem around data architecture. And so when we start to unpack some of that, this slide is a simple representation that I've used in a couple of different presentations where, on the left-hand side, it's a simple representation of a lot of the common challenges that we would see. These are probably, it's not exhaustive, it's not maybe even what you see exactly in your organization, but it's commonly what we see across any number of organizations that we work with. I think, though, the interesting piece when I talk to our teams are really sitting in the middle of what the most common data challenges are that our clients experience. And so, specifically, we really think about driving outcomes and how do we provide actionable insights out of data from the shop floor to the leaders in the business or even back to the shop floor that need to take action. And so probably the 5 most common challenges that we see really stem around what we refer to as interoperability or the need for it. Essentially, that common challenge dealing with the fact that you've got different types of devices that are sending out different types of data, so different protocols, different schemas, different structures. And that all creates a need for different types of processing. So on the right-hand side, we talk about best practices. We're going to get into a bit more of a detailed kind of solution approach a bit later. So I'm not going to beleaguer these, but really the best practice around interoperability comes down to architecting for flexibility. And that gets to ensuring that you've got the right components to really account for the type of action that you seek to take with your data. Security is obviously a key. You can't go anywhere without needing to understand the cybersecurity implications of really anything. So when we think about N 4.0 and we think about devices that are on the shop floor and the need for security, we think about balancing risk and performance, and that gets into making sure that frankly we create the right level of access for the right people to ensure that our platforms run the way that we expect them to. So we can't lock everyone out, and there's ways and techniques that we can make certain aspects of the data available to the right people from an IT perspective to ensure that our platforms are running appropriately. The third piece really gets down to, how do I know that all of the data that is supposed to leave the shop floor and reach an analytic dashboard, perhaps, how do we make sure that actually happens? And that gets down to the term we would use is ingestion integrity. Basically, did the right data get from the shop floor to the cloud? The cloud architecture is what a lot of our clients are using, and so the best practice there is ensuring auditability. So what's our audit trail to let us know, frankly, that data left the shop floor and arrived at its destination appropriately? The fourth one, getting down to use cases, right? So top-down versus bottom-up approach, and what this really is talking about is the need for balance between the organizational view or the enterprise view from the top down and the need to create value versus the bottom-up view of what data may already be available, or where's the low-hanging fruit, as it were, to enable rapid time to value. So it's really about considering not only the top-down view, but also balancing that with the bottom-up view from the shop floor. The last common challenge, TMI, would be the older pop culture reference, but too much data, right? How do I make sure that based on my use case, right, in point 4, gets the right amount of data, and that I don't over communicate data to a cloud source to really create unnecessary noise within our data platform. So Really, those are the top 5. There are, as I mentioned, there's solutions out there. We're going to talk a bit about that as we move ahead, but those would be, David, the top 5 things that we see, and usually wind up as a good starting point or a frame for this type of a conversation of how do we improve productivity, how do we improve sustainability in our organizations for the manufacturing clients we work with.
I think I'm back on now. There I am. A very good list of 5 key challenges, John. I mean, much of this is reflected in some of the research we do here at MLC, and in particular that interoperability piece. So many manufacturing companies, like and it's true in many industries, not just manufacturing, are collections of different systems. Multiple systems that we have issues with about having common data formats and common ways of storing it and other issues regarding that. But the opportunity to get to deal with that and to rationalize what we're doing with a common data platform and an architecture that can deal with these issues is really, really critical going forward. So I really like what you had to say there. So let's move on. I want to introduce our second panelist right now. His name is Sudhir Arni. He's the Senior Vice President of Business Outcomes at Site Machine. Welcome, Sudhir. Great to have you as part of this discussion today. And before we actually get into having that discussion, I'd like to put up a quick polling question for the audience for you all to take a look at and answer. And I think we'll make some comments about it when we do get your answers. So crew, could we put up that polling question, please, and take a couple seconds to fill it out? Thank you. Okay. Okay. Tyler, Lauren, do we have results? We do. Okay. Well, somewhat of a mixed bag, somewhat with limited results. Very interesting. Let's take a look at these. Okay. So, John, Sudhir, what's your reaction to the results? What you expected, or any surprises here? John, you want to take that first?
Yeah, I think this is a good representation, David, of maybe what we see in the marketplace, is that we've got a broad kind of swath of clients that are experiencing different things at different points in time, right? And everyone's at maybe a different stage of maturity. I thought what stuck out maybe was that you've got everything from people who, yeah, we've got it, and we're doing this across a number of areas, about maybe 1 in 5 that came back and said, you know what, we haven't even started yet, right? Or that we're not currently using it, right? And I think that's, Sudhir, I know that's probably what we see across the market. I know, at least in my anecdotal sampling, I'll say is fairly common in my travels.
Sudhir, your view?
I'm actually encouraged to see 14% saying they've done it in a number of different areas, number of use cases. It is encouraging to see that. I believe that's progress as compared to the last few years based on what we've been seeing. Otherwise, a number of other options and answers seem like very much in line with what we see in the market. Getting started and taking it to scale is the challenge.
Yeah. The higher you go up on that scale, the more difficult it gets.
Yeah,
for sure. Okay, well, thank you, audience. That's a good for enabling us to take your pulse as to where you stand on your own data mastery journeys. Let's go into some discussion now We've looked at what John put up on the screen with regard to the 5 key challenges. You all heard what some of the ML research was on it, which is very compatible with what John was talking about. So among all those, John, Sudhir, which of the common challenges is the most prevalent? Is it interoperability? Is it security? Is it what you call ingestion integrity? Or is it really too hard to rate these? They're all pretty much even. Is there one that's prevalent? John, would you like to take that first?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think so. I'm a consultant, so every answer I say starts with "it depends." And apologies, I'm going to do that here. So a starting point is where on the journey are they, right? So someone who's just starting off is going to be at a different point and have a different challenge than a team or an organization that are across multiple areas. But from my view, I think it comes down to the use cases, right? So it's top down versus bottom up, balancing that approach. And for the purpose of defining what value the organization is seeking to achieve, I think that's critical in any sort of transformation effort that we're going to embark upon. We've got to have that point that we're trying to achieve and clearly define that. And so I'd say if the client's starting off and where we've seen a number of folks are maybe in that grouping, I think it's about use cases and defining what value we're trying to achieve and what actions we want to take to get there.
Yeah, Sudhir, what's your view of what might be most prevalent here?
I agree with the whole idea that John, you mentioned on top-down alignment, focus on value, extremely important. It's very hard to get the organization together. But one key aspect that has been standing out for us again and again when we work with our customers has been just the interoperability of data. One of the big challenges that you mentioned. It's hindering a lot of organizations to even start these efforts. Even when you've identified the value, you know which plants you want to go to. But the idea that data is so disparate in manufacturing, as you said, David, initially in your introduction, it is really hard for these organizations to figure out what is the best way to use all the data that's available. And once you've started, maybe you've solved 1 or 2 use cases, maybe you've gone to 1 or 2 plants, but then scaling to 30, 40, 50 plants, the data challenge ends up becoming the biggest block in terms of going and extracting value from all the data that's already existed. It's typically what we are seeing.
Yeah, it's not an easy equation. And I would imagine, my sense is that even though it seems simple and perhaps even expected that you would try to define what value you want to get out of this, that is not an easy thing to define going in until you get some experience with these projects. So that kind of segues into our next question, and that is, once you do decide as a company, as a manufacturer, to move forward with being a data-driven enterprise as we talk about it, what's the next thing you see, or the next thing that a manufacturer should do as part of their pathway to this goal of being a data-driven enterprise? Is it get all the managers in a room and come up with a vision, or is it find the most immediate pain point and deal with that, and then hope the vision comes out of that exercise, or some combination? Sudhir, you want to start with that one?
Of course, yeah. I think it's a question that every manufacturer is grappling with. Now we want to go on the journey. We've made sure that we have alignment. We want to start. Where do we start? How do we start? We've typically seen identifying that one plant where the plant leadership is committed to go on this data-driven journey as the first person in the room, as the first plant in the organization, knowing very well that it's going to be hard, knowing very well that there will be challenges, even though there's technology available, even though outcomes are defined, being able to identify that one plant who wants to go on the journey, truly prove it out, truly figure out how does this scale for that organization, is typically the first question that we try to answer with a lot of our customers. We've seen in a number of organizations where if there is not a committed plan to go on this journey to begin with, it gets harder and harder to scale this and achieve value, prove things out, see ROI, and keep moving forward.
John, do you agree, or does you have some shades of difference here?
No, I think that's spot on. I mean, the key is we're looking for, I think what Sudhir is saying, it's about engagement, it's about finding those early adopters so that we can start to try to work towards the that early proof of value. And I think that's key, because we can't truly uncover what all the, so if that'd be the business view or the change view, right? I think about it from a technical impediments perspective or challenges. We can't uncover those challenges if we don't have someone that's willing to say, yes, let's go. And so the term fail fast comes to mind, right? Or we have to break some eggs to make an omelet, however we want to talk about it. But the idea is, how do we really start to uncover the challenges that we're gonna see? And you can't do that without that early adopter, without that sponsorship from a key leader within the organization to help drive that out.
You've got to have that top management buy-in in a sustained way. And that may mean demonstrating return fairly quickly, if that's the philosophy of the company. There could be a different philosophy where there's more patience associated with some of these projects, but we've gone through a whole set of challenges, and the journey appears challenging in and of itself. Are you both optimistic that most companies can undertake these transformations successfully and have the stamina to see them through? Or is there something they really have to focus on to ensure that they do have that stamina to see them through, that organizational stamina that includes leadership buy-in to see these things through? Because, as you said, you could fail fast and then the company could pull back. So what are your learnings about this sort of thing? John, you want to start on this one?
Yeah, and I think when we say fail fast, it's about failing for the intent of learning, right? So that we understand what the technical challenges are and how to solve for them. And if I stick with that tech theme, I think some of the innovations that we're seeing in the market, and I know Sudhir, I don't want to steal your thunder because you're going to go through this in a bit, but I think, David, there's so many interesting technical enablers that are coming onto the market now that can help solve things like interoperability. There's off-the-shelf tools that you can leverage, kind of built for purpose. There's also ways to leverage modern data stack technologies that can handle these the explosion of data that we're seeing that's now available that we previously couldn't even really think about, or we could think about how to solve for it, but it was just not really feasible. So for me, I'm incredibly optimistic, and one of the main reasons is that some of the technical enablers that are coming along are starting to match up with the ideas that a lot of leaders have had for a number of years.
Yeah, Sudhir, your view?
It makes a lot of sense, John, what he said, really around there's more and more technology now available that can help solve some of these challenges so that manufacturers can start using the data and get going. I'm extremely optimistic because of that, and a multiple other reasons, really, with what's happening in manufacturing overall. There is a need to use the data, improve productivity. There is an absolute need to become more sustainable. 25% of greenhouse emissions in the world comes from manufacturing. Even today, it's really hard for anyone to even measure in real time what are the emissions from the shop floor when the manufacturing process is running. You just can't do it. It's really hard to do that. So the need is extremely high. More and more we are seeing with our customers in the last few years, the questions that come to us is not anymore about how do we go solve a use case, how do we do a pilot. The questions are more and more now about, we want to start, really help us understand how do we scale this. We are in it to fight. The competitive dynamics in the market and manufacturing are becoming more and more critical, but the need is becoming more urgent. And the technology solutions, the fact that companies like NTT Data are now really putting all the resources, energy into help scale these technologies is something that gives me a lot of optimism about the market is beginning to adopt all this now.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, and it kind of goes to the point you were making, John, about value. What is the shape of the value curve that you're seeing? In other words, when companies just get started with this, they may be anticipating or hoping for certain benefits with regard to quicker problem resolution, or cost savings, or greater speed to market, or some tactical advantage, if I may put it that way. But as they go forward and they try to scale, the value equation, I would imagine, changes, and they're expecting more. How do you see that curve, the shape of that curve, and how do you see it playing out? John?
Yeah, I think the concept in the market, or that I think a lot of us have talked about and then worked toward over the years of driving transformations, really becomes about how do we self-fund a transformation, right? So, from my perspective, it comes down to, we talked a moment ago about defining the value and use cases, and I think it's about, I think Sudhir mentioned about driving into thinking about, at the plant level, at the line level, process area level, those types of things. It's about identifying those specific granular points where we can define the value as a starting point, and then create a building block that you can then take out to other places, right? So if we're talking about interoperability, how can we solve that at a micro level with a single line, and then look for other lines at other plants? Or how do we expand that within a single plant and go from there? And maybe different clients are going to work differently, but the idea would be the starting with a pilot, starting with that proof of concept, proof of value, that yes, we can influence whatever the metric is here that we're going to insert, and then start to using that pilot or the POC as the building block that we move forward with to go to other lines and other process areas and plants.
Okay. Shape of the curve, Sudhir, what's your view?
Fully agree with John on the idea of doing an initial engagement that can show proof of value. It's extremely critical for most organizations to have before they move forward. What we have typically prescribed to our customers has been, let that proof of value up first be about a common data foundation. Choose your use cases, try to solve specific problems, but try not to go after a small subset of data or one application. We call it a data first versus app first approach at Site Machine. Think about a data first approach. In that proof of value itself, try and understand what a common data foundation could mean for you as a manufacturer. Get data from all the various systems. There is technology available that can make all that data truly harmonized into a data foundation. Go after creating some real-time visibility up first. There's tremendous value right in that. Most of the manufacturers even today don't have true real-time visibility. With that foundation, scale your efforts up to doing everything around predictive and prescriptive analytics over a period of time. There is a curve, but the starting point we recommend should be with take all your data, build your foundation, then start doing everything that you want to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Makes perfect sense. We touched on sustainability just a moment ago, but let's take a little deeper dive into that subject, and give me your thoughts about where would a manufacturer start with using manufacturing data, given that it's going to be coming from so many sources, and we've got all the format problems and interoperability issues that they could start with to impact in a positive way their sustainability goals. Sudhir, you want to start with that one?
Sure. There are 2 or 3 resource intensive areas where we are beginning to see some very meaningful value creating opportunities coming in the sustainability realm. Electricity usage, gas usage, water consumption, all these sources can be measured. You can measure how much consumption is happening from those sources. A plant can always look at the time trending of how much electricity I consumed, how much gas I consumed, how much water I consumed, and you can at least have a viewpoint on what needs to be done. But the real magic happens when you take data from these different sources like electricity, gas, and water, blend that with your manufacturing data. Now you can really start understanding at what time of the day, what kind of machines are running, which is resulting in a lot of consumption of all the resources that I have. Then start to problem solve. How can we reduce electricity consumed, gas consumed per unit of product that's being made without impacting the quality that comes out? Magic is in blending data from the manufacturing source and the resources that you're consuming at the plant. That's typically how we suggest our customers that they should start on this.
Yeah, it sounds like you could do some targeting with this. John, your thoughts?
I would agree 100% with Sudhir here. I mean, it's about, let's get the consumption information, let's pull all that together. Once we have that together, then we can start to look at the manufacturing data, and then start to model where the opportunities are for improvement. I don't know that I've added anything other than maybe packaging in a more concise version, what Sudhir mentioned, which was I wholeheartedly agree with.
Yeah. Well, manufacturers have very significant sustainability goals and also the opportunity to lead on this very important issue. And our most recent survey on sustainability, which we published the results of in December, show that well over 85% of the respondents to our sustainability survey said that manufacturers have a special, quote unquote, special responsibility to leading the charge on sustainability. So this is a really important issue for manufacturing companies and for our industry. So let me go into what is a favorite topic. It's been a favorite topic here at MLC for many, many years, which tells you how difficult this issue is. It's IT-OT convergence. And we know this is a critical area that has to come together to help us succeed with using data effectively in our organizations. We've been at this a long time, trying to bring these two groups together. I think we've made some progress. We still have more distance to travel. But what are some of the best practices you've experienced or you've advocated to help bridge the gap between these two groups? John, you want to start with that?
Yeah, we talked about this a bit a moment ago. I think I'm going to use the S word, right? It's sponsorship, and I think if you think about these two groups, right? So if you think about OT and IT, the OT is typically, you've got a COO organization or a BU lead or a plant lead that would need to be on board with what we're doing here, and then it's the bridging of that gap over into the legacy CIO organization, right? And how do we get those two to play together? And I think it's really about how do we identify the right people. I think Sudhir gave a great example of this, of let's find a willing participant, kind of an early adopter at the plant level that can carry this forward. I think that's Sudhir, a great example of how do we find kind of a sponsorship at a micro level, but we still at the organizational level need to have that executive level sponsorship to help drive and sponsor, and then that can help with the kind of change in mindset of focus on the shop floor, understanding that there is data available that they can leverage to help improve productivity, or in this case, like we're talking about today, sustainability as well.
Sudhir?
We are beginning to see this come up as an area that companies want to go deeper into more and more, much more than before. In a few years back, maybe the question really was about, should IT do it or should OT do it? Now organizations are coming in saying, okay, how do we really work together? What is our role in this? One thing we are beginning to see, as you look at manufacturing data and usage, if you go across any organization, any manufacturing organization, manufacturing data is a part of their data strategy. A lot of the data related skills these days, more and more with a larger cloud strategy, lies in the IT organization. But the eventual usage of manufacturing data to solve problems is on the manufacturing shop floor. there's a very easy, seamless way for IT and OT to come together. The moment the thinking ends up becoming about, we need a larger enterprise data strategy, manufacturing data being a part of that, likely led by IT. And unless IT leads that charge, manufacturing shop floor is not going to have access to all this data in the way they want, in real time that they want. And IT is not going to be successful unless OT actually starts using that data. We are beginning to see this become more and more seamless. Again, still a lot to be answered here, but the conversations we are having are becoming more about how do we really bring it together, and not as much about should I do this, should the other person do it, which is, I think, tremendous progress.
Yeah, and I would imagine that, you know, a successful data project that spans both encourages further collaboration and cooperation. Yeah, kind of the proof of the pudding is in the eating, so to speak. Lastly, let me ask you all about, we've talked about the journey, we've talked about how to get started, we've talked about some of the challenges along the way. We know since the pandemic that many manufacturers are trying to accelerate their manufacturing 4.0 journeys. They're under the gun to be able to be more agile, more flexible, to deal with disruptions more effectively. Nobody wants to get caught like some did during at the beginning of the pandemic. And we here at MLC, our conversation with companies has definitely changed. We no longer talk about the why of M4.0. It's all about how can I do it better? How can I do it faster? Because it's an accepted fact now. So let's turn that question on these data transformation projects. How would manufacturers go about accelerating their journey on this path, this data transformation path going forward? What have you learned from your customers, from your experience, that might be building blocks for them? John?
Yeah, I think as a building block, you know, it's about, we talked a little bit about kind of or I mentioned earlier in the question about value and that kind of curve of the value, about how you might sequence events. I think for me, it's about that, I'd say probably two elements. One, maybe more business facing. It's strategically aligning a backlog, right? So what are the use cases I want to deliver, and how do I align that to a strategic backlog from a value creation perspective? And then if I'm thinking technically, it's probably about setting that data foundation. I think Sudhir, at risk of stealing your thunder, but maybe even providing a segue, I think it's about how do we set that data foundation early, and then enabling the execution longer term.
Okay, Sudhir, any thoughts on this?
Couldn't agree more with John. I think it's absolutely in line, aligning to some strategic initiatives, and really as an organization deciding that, okay, we want to become a data-driven organization, we want to use it, let's start solving different parts of the puzzle step by step. That initial commitment is important. And as a technology enabler, we think a data foundation which brings all the manufacturing data together is a good accelerator, and ROI can be pretty rapid. It's becoming evident with so many examples at customers that we have worked with. Having the data foundation strategy right up front is a big technology enabler that organizations should typically think about.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue for where we want to go next in our discussion. You've got a couple of actual use cases you'd like to present to illustrate everything we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes or so. So Sudhir, please go ahead and dive into those and let us see what you've learned.
Yep. I think we'll have the slides up here.
Yeah, I'll go off camera now.
Conceptually, I want to start with the idea of an app first versus data first, as I was mentioning earlier, because all the couple of case studies that we talk about are all going to be based in that. Traditionally, we have seen more and more, most organizations that are trying to leverage manufacturing data have focused a lot on building one application at a time. So let's say, for example, you're building an application for predicting downtime of machines. Then you go and build the second application, which is about predicting quality of a product. Then you build a third application, which is all about throughput improvement on a specific line. But end of the day, each of these applications have their own tech stack. You're looking at connecting to data sources, pulling in a subset of data, building an application after you've cleansed the data, you've contextualized it and normalized it. Tomorrow, if the problem ends up becoming an application 4, you'll still have to build another application. This is not a scalable approach. The scalable approach that we have seen has worked very well, and we recommend to all our customers is a data-first approach. As we'll see on the next slide here, we recommend connecting to all the possible data sources right at get-go, get all the data together in a uniform common data foundation. So now you don't have to worry about next time you have a use case 1 versus use case 2 that you have to go to a source data source again and pull that data. Instead, you're focusing now on what problem has come up that I need to solve. I already have all the data for it in a normalized, standardized fashion. Doesn't matter if it's coming from PLC 1 versus PLC 2, doesn't matter if it's coming from a quality system, and you have all sorts of applications available to start solving for problems. It's a much more scalable and ROI driven approach. The case studies that I'll touch on, each of these case studies has used exactly the same approach. We've gone to our customers, taken data from multiple data sources, blended it, contextualized it into a data foundation, and then thought about which problems need to be addressed. The first example I'll touch on comes from one of our customers in the automotive supply chain. They are in the electric vehicle supply chain where they make magnet wire and supply to some of the largest electric vehicle OEMs. Their challenge was having a lot of energy being used across various assets and a lot of scrap in the process. We use exactly the same approach that I mentioned on the data first side. We went and connected to multiple data sources, helped them build that data foundation, focused on scrap reduction as the initial problem, although they were solving problems related to speed improvement on the line and everything else. But scrap reduction was tremendous sustainability value for them because the material loss was significant every time they were scrapping some product. We were able to reduce their scrap significantly, which ended up again resulting in energy consumption per unit of product that's coming out. That's a key part, energy consumption per unit of product. That's what we focused on. It was done with a machine learning analytic deployed on top of that data foundation, and it's being scaled as the same analytic on a data foundation across a network of plants. We did a similar approach with the data foundation, very focused on steam reduction in the paper manufacturing industry. Very different industry, very different manufacturing process, but the approach remains the same. On the next slide, you'll see that on a paper mill, we went and connected to a number of different data sources in a paper manufacturing process, a massive paper machine, lots of other ancillary processes around it. We took data from their MES system, the data park process, combined the production data with their energy data and their steam data, resulted in 2% decrease in steam usage. Approach was exactly the same. Data foundation, applications running on top of data foundation. This plant did not have to go to a steam generator to get steam data out separately, go to manufacturing data out from a paper machine separately, and then solve it. They had the foundation, which had all this data blended already. They focused more on how do we do analysis to reduce our steam usage. There are a number of other examples. There's another example I'll touch on very quickly on the next slide, where we were able to achieve similar improvements in the pharmaceutical side. We were optimizing cycle times, and just the idea of reducing the waste had a tremendous increase in output. Again, any sort of energy metric per unit of product coming out tremendously improved. That's what I thought I'll share. David, I'll hand back to you.
You sign back on here. Thank you very much, Sudhir. Very interesting. The common denominator here is that data foundation. You've got to have this in place to enable these changes to take place in a positive way. That's what I'm getting out of this. John, any comment on the case studies before we move on?
I think what I'd just say is that what was interesting as I looked at these was the fact that all of them link back to you didn't hear Sudhir talking about deployment of technology for technology's sake, right? it's the business outcome that we're driving, and how do we help that manufacturer get some sort of value that aligns back to a strategic goal and direction, right? So we talked about that a little bit about, how do we set a core building block? It was that vision and that strategic goal that they were working to achieve, and you heard that all throughout is working to achieve business outcome, not necessarily the deployment of technology. So I thought that was interesting, and certainly aligns to a lot of the conversation we've had.
Yeah, and the problems that these things were addressing are very real day-to-day problems that manufacturers have, like reducing cycle time variability. If you can impact that in a substantial way, you can really make significant advantages for your company going forward. There are so many of these kinds of things, aren't there? Like cycle time variability or some other operational aspect that if they can be attacked successfully using data, better data, overall we can improve the operations of these manufacturing companies substantially in a collective way. I think that to me looks like one of the real big opportunities here. We may start with something like cycle time, but then we advance to broader objectives. We're going to get into Q&A in just a moment, but I think we have time for a second poll question. Lauren, Tyler, would you like to put that up and we can do it? So please take this quick poll. This is a combination of energy and other resources data with production data to identify cost optimization and consumption opportunities. Very interested to see what we're going to get. Very interesting. Like half not currently are not doing this, but those that are seeing some results. And 13% are saying those results are meaningful. That's encouraging. Would you agree, John Sudhir? What's your take on this?
Encouraged for sure. I think this again. It lines up, I think, to what we see in the market. I think there is in what we see in the clients that we speak to, a lot of effort around just reporting of things like emissions data, so greenhouse gas emissions, and it's how do we go beyond that? And then I think that's what we were talking about earlier, is if we think about that evolution of let's just report the news in terms of emissions, that's step one of many. And so I think that's a lot of the conversations we have are with clients about just trying to report the news first, and then we can start to help them optimize down the line.
Sudhir, what's your take? Any surprises in those numbers?
No surprises, but very encouraging to see that there are manufacturers who are beginning to blend that data and seeing value. Definitely a lot that can be done in that space, no doubt about it.
Yeah, a lot of upside potential. Yeah. Okay, we are at the audience Q&A portion of our session today. So if you have a question or a comment, if you'd like to say what you're doing in your company on your data journey, we'd like to hear about that too. So please raise your hand or put a comment or a question in the chat, and we will attempt to answer it. Lauren, Tyler, do we have anything to address at this point?
We most certainly do. We have a couple questions, and as David said, feel free to use the question box and we will be able to filter through those. So our first question is, do you see any single most common point of failure when capturing and working with OT data?
Okay, who'd like to tackle that one? Sudhir, you're smiling. So I think you've had experience with this.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And it does go back to collaboration between truly various functions in an organization. We see a number of times that it's a very app-driven, IT-driven approach, not much involvement of the plant shop floor as experts, even when we are making the data useful. That's typically a point of failure. And a number of times we've also seen ops driving the whole initiative without IT involvement, because you can get success in the first few maybe months, but eventually when you have to scale it across the enterprise, both have to come together. It's a reality. I think a lot of them are much more positive about collaboration, but it is definitely a point of failure even now.
Okay, John, comment?
I would agree. I think Sudhir, the way he's framed it, when it comes down to kind of an app-driven approach, is what we see a lot of our clients trying to do, is kind of point-to-point solutions, as opposed to thinking, how do I bring all of this together at one time? And I think, you know, that kind of a common data model, common data framework, and the lack thereof maybe is what drives some of that, is the inability to tackle it.
Okay, Lauren, what else do we have?
So we have one that has said, what is the role of data in driving sustainability within manufacturing firms? I feel like that's a big question. That could be like another session, but I mean, we have a couple minutes.
Okay, that is a global question for sure. John?
I'm going to preface this, David, by saying that I am the industry lead for manufacturing for the data and analytics practice at NTT Data, and say that data is absolutely critical. And if you're going to achieve any of the net zero emissions goals, you're going to have to leverage data. So that's my half-hearted answer. What I'd say is, without the ability to first just report and bring all the data in around emissions, right? So if we think about consumption data, we were talking about earlier, whether it's electricity, gas, water, we've got to be able to bring that together. And then that's a starting point, one. Two, Sudhir's just walked us through, how do we then bring the OT data together and then start to marry those two data sets together to bring a singular view of where is consumption happening on the shop floor within a plant. So we can't do any of that without data, right? Whether it's about the shop floor equipment, whether it's about the energy consumption. So when we think about it, it's fundamental, foundational, critical. You know, insert word here, not to overstate the importance of data here, as I had to point out my biasness here. But I would just say that we can't do any of that without data.
Yeah.
I'll pause there, Sudhir.
Good, accurate data that you can trust. Any comment on that one, Sudhir?
Fully agree with John. Wholehearted, yes. I think that's a starting point. I personally am waiting to see, we know 25% emissions are coming from manufacturing, but personally, I would like to see in real time ability for the world of manufacturing to measure and truly say the number is 25% or higher or lower, but be able to measure in real time. It's going to start with data. Way too many manufacturers have come to us now and have said, we have so many large supply chains, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. Maybe we can measure some sort of emissions in our own factories, but we are only assembling stuff. The real manufacturing is happening with our suppliers. Can you guys help us connect these factories on a technology platform and at least tell us what is the emissions coming from across our supply chain? Not going to happen without data. That's definitely the first step.
Yeah, and then you bring up an interesting point. This is ecosystem data.
Yeah.
You need to have that ecosystem data, and that presents its own set of challenges, I'm sure. Lauren, what's our third question, if we have one?
We do. One more, because then I feel like this is going to take a few, but can you share some best practices for moving beyond a POC and perhaps give an example?
Okay. We'll toss the ball up. Who'd like to jump for it? John, Sudhir? John, you want to go first?
Sudhir, I've jumped in first. It feels like every time. If you want to jump ahead.
Absolutely, yeah. We've typically seen Going beyond a POC starts much before a POC is defined. And that's becoming more and more evident because a number of organizations where we also thought that we had set everything up well organizationally, the customer, that post a POC, everything will be fine and we'll just scale to many factories. It doesn't happen that way. So the effort of scaling starts even before a POC is defined. Is the most critical part is what we have learned now. The critical elements that need to go into it is a clear understanding of how do you define success or failure of a POC? And once success or failure happens, whatever the result is, where are you going next? Have you lined up your strategic objectives and strategic plans where you want to cascade this and start going in a sequential or altogether manner? Who are the sponsors from IT and ops? A lot of these questions need to be answered right up front, even before a POC starts. If it's being defined after POC ends, in my opinion, it's too late and scaling never happens.
Yeah, that's a very good point. John, anything to add?
Yeah, I might just give a bit of, from a technical perspective, I'd just say we've talked a lot about, and I know I've been a part of that, is having the right sponsorship, having the right backlog. What are we trying to achieve strategically? And I think, Sudhir, you just mentioned that. The other piece, which is kind of a given, is making sure we've got the right architecture in place, right? So what's the right set of tools and components that I'm going to need to be able to achieve as well? So I think it's not probably one thing, it's a lot of things working together that have to come into place to enable scale. And I think that's probably what I would add there to Sudhir's answer, which I also agree with.
Okay, well, I think that's the last word. I think we're almost at the top of the hour. I want to thank Sudhir Arni and John Petrusic for a fascinating conversation about data. It's one of many we're having, and it's an ongoing conversation because this is a moving target for many companies. And given the increase in data volumes that we're expecting and all the challenges we've discussed today, this will be a subject that MLC will be tackling, I'm sure, a number of times this year as we go forward on our M4.0 journey. So a few housekeeping items to close up before we go. We do have an additional resource, building the bedrock of agile manufacturing from a Site Machine. You can access it. It's an ebook. You can access it using that link or that QR code. We're finding these QR codes to work really well. We just so happen to be fielding our 2023 Data Mastery and Analytics Survey as part of our critical issues research here at the Manufacturing Leadership Council. So we really would appreciate you taking that survey. We're going to report the results of it in the April issue of the Manufacturing Leadership Journal. This is a really important study we do just about every year or 18 months to give us a clear view on where you are headed on your own data mastery journeys. Next, please. We've got a really solid program of plant tours this year at MLC, as you can see by this list. Coming up next month at Whirlpool in Findlay, Ohio, we'll be discussing world-class manufacturing as an operating system at their factory that makes washing machines in Findlay. So if you haven't signed up for that yet, please do, and you can see the rest coming up. It's a tremendous opportunity to learn firsthand, right on the line, what companies are doing on their M4.0 journeys in different areas. And of course, the 19th annual Rethink will take place this June 26th through 28th at Marco Island, Florida. Registration is now open. We're going to be talking about how to accelerate your own digital transformation journeys in manufacturing. Really important conference. And of course, for all the council members on the line, we will also be having our annual critical issues debate and vote on our plan, our strategic plan as a council going forward over the next year. So please sign up for that. We look forward to seeing you in June. I'm David Brosell. Look forward to seeing you on a future MLC session. Bye-bye and have a great day.